Hello everyone, I Dr. Pramila Bhardwaj telling you about what is the difference between old and new tax regime. When our Honorable Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced the new tax regime in the budget which is applicable from 1st April 2021, there are more slabs and lower tax rates in the new tax regime, which is much demanded by all the taxpayers in India. The new tax regime is available for all the individuals and HUF, but it is optional. The taxpayers have an option to opt for one, whether they go for the old tax regime and whether they choose the new tax regime. On one side, there are more tax slabs with low tax rates in new tax regime, but on the other hand, all the deductions and exemptions which were available under old tax regime have been removed from the new one. This is the only difference among all the old and new tax regimes. But people are wondering which option is best for them, which tax regime is good for them. This is the lecture which may help to them whether they go for old tax regime or they go for new tax regime. Here a look of both the tax regimes. You can see that in the old tax regime, when a person has income below 2,50,000, in both the tax regime there is 0% tax liability. When the person's income increases from 2,50,000 to 5 lakh, it is in both the regime it is 5%. The difference starts from the next slab, which is above 5 lakh but below 7,50,000. In the old tax regime, the rate was 20%, but the new tax regime it is lower rate, approximately 50%, that is 10% tax rates. In the next step also, which is above 7,50,000 and up to 10 lakh, in the old tax regime the rate was 20%, but in the old tax regime it is only 15%. For the next slab it is 30%, and in the new tax regime it is 20%. For the next slab, which is 12,50,000 up to 15 lakh, it is 30% in the old tax regime, but it is only 25% in the new tax regime. And above 15 lakh, both the tax regime have the same percentage of tax rates. But now one can wonder which is the good for them, whether the old tax regime or whether they go for the new tax rates. Here is a solution, or here is a explanatory solution which may help them to choose between these two tax regimes. Let's take an example, like a person who is investing or getting allowance of HRA or leave encashment, or there is a standard deduction of rupees 50,000 under section 16(1)(a) under the head salary, or the person is investing in money in PPF, where he or she may get deduction under section 80C to 80U, like life insurance premium, principal interest component of home loans, saving account interest. There are a number of exemption and deductions available in old tax regime. So what to choose? Let's take an example. Let's X is an employee in a financial institution who is availing few major deductions and exemptions. He is not availing all the exemption and deductions. Now we can compare it as in this chart, like the person's annual income is suppose 9 lakh in both the tax regimes. In the old tax regime, we get a standard deduction under section 16(1) under the head salary of rupees 50,000. He may getting the allowance of HRA and getting a deduction of rupees 30,000. PPF under section 80C, he may get exemption of 21,000 if he is investing only 21,000 in PPF, or leave travel allowance is 25,000. And food and meal coupons are also available there, which he is getting from his organization, and the total deduction may goes to 1,50,000. This is only available in old tax regime, not in the new tax regime. Now we can easily see that from this table, net taxable income of Mr. X is 7,50,000 under old tax regime, and in new tax regime the taxable income is 9 lakh. Now what he should have to pay? This is the tax rates according to both the tax regimes. Under old tax regime, when the person has an income, X has the income of 7,50,000 up to 2,50,000, he have not to be given any single rupee. This is 0%. For 2,50,000, he has to pay 12,500. For 5 lakh to 7,50,000, he has to pay 50,000. Under the old new tax regime, he has to pay only 25,000 because the tax rates are only 50% reduced. So he has to pay less. Because in the old tax regime, he has the only up to 7,50,000, his total tax becomes 62,500. But in the old tax regime, he has the income of 9 lakh, then he has gone for the next tax slab 7,50,000 and he has to pay 15% more, that is 22,500. Now, but still his tax is lesser than the old tax regime. Now he has to pay the health and education cess, which is 4%, 2,500 under old tax regime and 2,400 under new tax regime. Now his tax is 65,000 under old tax regime and 62,400 in the new tax regime. This is because he is not availing all the exemption and deduction under the old tax regime. So from the above table, we can see that X has to pay less tax under new tax regime. So one can say X can save 2,600 rupees in new tax regime if he opt to it, if he go for the new tax regime. Or one can opt new tax regime if he or she is not availing all the income and all the exemptions and deductions for old tax regime. Now taken another example. This is now X is claiming for all the major exemption and deduction. We are taking the same example which is the previous one. X is a employee in a financial institution and his annual income is now goes to 18 lakh and he is availing all the exemption and deduction, all the major exemption and deduction, not all but major exemption and deduction like HRA, health insurance, leave travel concession or allowance, national pension system scheme or public provident fund. These all deduction and exemptions only available in the new old tax regime, not in the new tax regime. This is not applicable in the new tax regime. Now his income is 18 lakh. After availing all these deduction and exemption, his income reduced to 3,30,000. Now his net taxable income is 14,70,000 under old tax regime, but it is 18 lakh under new tax regime. Now up to what he has to pay the tax? Here is the table. He is paying tax up to 2,53,500 and in the new tax regime he has to pay 2,77,500 and here also he has to pay the 4% health and education cess which is 10,140 in old tax regime and 11,100 in new tax regime. The total tax payable by him or the total tax liability for X is 2,63,000 in old tax regime and it is 2,88,600 in new tax regime. Now we can easily say that he can save tax by rupees 24,960 if he choose the old tax regime, but it is only beneficial when a person is availing all major exemption and deduction. That's the way one person can be benefited, or he may do investments in various sources, or he can avail deduction under section 80C to 80U for getting more tax benefit, or he or she has to do tax planning according to old tax regime. But in the new tax regime, when we are not getting any exemption and deduction, we have a lower tax rates. So it's the person's choice whether he go for old tax regime or new tax regime, but it is beneficial only those person, or it is beneficial for only those people who are availing all major exemption and deduction for or under old tax regime. So we can say that the intention of the policy maker behind the introduction of new tax regime is for the benefits of the taxpayers, and they are also has an intention behind this introduction of new tax regime, that they simply or they want to say that a person is not doing investment only for getting the tax benefits. He or she has to do investment for the insurance or for securing their family or their future also. So now you have a new point of view. If you are going for new tax regime, you do investments in PPF or new pension system, or you are taking home loan, then the only point of view is you are securing your future and your family's future, not only for getting the tax benefits. Thank you so much. I hope this article or this lecture helps you for choosing between the old tax regime and new tax regime, which is beneficial for you, which is the best option for you. Thank you all.